Vajda. In the name of the British Contemporary Music Foundation, I would like to welcome you all to our mustMEET series. And just a reminder that we have a conducting and composition masterclass going on as well. And the closing concert is going to be on Saturday here in the big hall of the Budapest Music Center. The theme of the masterclass this week is playing around with the woodwind quintet. So we have professors like Cathy Milliken who play a woodwind instrument and who know a lot about special extended techniques, and they work with our composers who are here for the masterclass, while the conductors are working on Mozart Drum Partita, which is one of the major pieces written for woodwinds and French also wind ensemble. And the concert is going to consist 3 or 4 quintets written for woodwind quintet, and then the second half is going to be the Mozart, and it's the part of the Café Budapest Festival as well. But now I would like to welcome you again and welcome Cathy Milliken, and we're going to start our presentation with some music.
Very much for that very nice introduction, Gregory, and I must say I'm completely delighted, alongside with my colleagues, wind colleagues, to be here for this week, and I'm also delighted to be invited and very honoured to be invited to mustMEET composer. I think that's a very interesting title. It sounds as if one doesn't often meet composer, but I think one must meet composer. I think it's important also for the composers. So I just played for you a piece called Pan by Benjamin Britten, English composer. And I played it for a specific reason, because it seems to give us the traditional idea of what an oboe is. We always have images of shepherds and pan flute players when we hear the oboe, because it is beautiful, I say. It has a very sweet sound, and it's a very melodic instrument. So I'm thinking, why is this so, that the oboe is such a melody instrument? And if we look at its forefathers, it gives us an idea. This is the Indian shalmai. coming from a completely different culture, but it is an instrument with two sides to the reed. There's another very beautiful double reed instrument called the duduk. So both of those instruments are obviously reed instruments, very, very beautiful sounds. In Hungary you have, of course, the very beautiful taracato, but it is a single reed, so not quite the double reed here. So I'm going to jump into the 20th, 21st century now, because I'd like to play you a piece that was written in 1971. And it's a piece by Bruno Maderna. Piece by Bruno Maderna, and he did something quite special. He composed fragments. He was very interested in speech-like rhythm, a sort of palander of melody, sometimes not complete melodies, but melodic fragments. And he composed 6 big fragments and asked the performer to complete the order. So there was a fair amount of freedom. You could also, when you repeat, change some of the parameters of the composition. So I will now play for you Solo by Bruno Maderna. I'll just show you the music for that in the next slide. And you'll see that I've marked yellow circles. That's just to show how short some of the phrases are. And as a performer, we have to find ways of bridging that or not, and how we want to use those fragments. Okay? So Bruno Maderna also knew another composer, Earl Brown, from New York. And I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about, but I'll tell my story anyway, because there's a point to it. Earl Brown was less interested in melody, because we started off with melody. Earl Brown was interested in the weight and shape of sound, and in the formal and spatial organization of sounds. So here we see a mobile by the artist Alexander Calder, and Earl Brown had commissioned that mobile. And the interesting thing was that in a later piece, Folio, one of them being December 52, which I'll show you the music for in a minute, he'd envisaged a type of 3D mobile that could actually be a type of conducting device. That never eventuated, but if I just show you the music, there's something I always think so pure about this score, and of course, no melody, no way. So, as an oboist, I find it very challenging and interesting to move into another world, to have another set of challenges. This music, I think it needs to be played by more than one person. It's not really a solo piece, but in a way it's like having a snowstorm coming at you with the depth of the snowflakes. If you can imagine that being three-dimensional, not two-dimensional, you sort of have the feeling of how the sound can be played spatially. We'll go to the next thing. So, another composer that I met, and I'm very aware that I have two esteemed composers in the room, of whom I have played much music, but Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, I played his piece called Spiral. So Spiral was interesting. It consists of plus and minus signs, which suggest to the performer how to transform the material he or she has freely imitated from a shortwave radio. Playing this piece was very difficult because it relied on an absolute in-moment recognition of what one was playing and transforming. So in a way it really awoke the composer's self, and I'm just on a track at the moment to show you how does one go from oboe to composing. But I think you have to fall in love with sound, and that goes with the oboe and beyond. So if I just talk to you a little bit about what we're going to hear is the introduction of a recording I made with Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, and it starts, you'll hear a bit of radio and you'll hear little bits of oboe where I'm searching for the event that I wish to imitate. And then you'll hear a sudden rush of sound, and that's the actual beginning of the piece. There are 4 pluses, remember I mentioned plus and minus, 4 pluses that relate to register, dynamic, the grouping of music, and the length of time it takes to play that. So let's just have a listen. That's just the very first beginning of the piece. I can show you the music. That's the whole score. But if we go on to the next one, I can show you my score that I made. And you'll see those 4 pluses in the left-hand corner. That's applied to all parameters of registering intensity, dower, as a length, and the groupings. And I had assigned values, and then every time there was a minus, I took that minus to apply to one of the values that I'd had. And that looks all very nice on paper, but it's quite difficult to do when you're on the spot. But it was a huge challenge, and it made me start thinking off the paper and start working how I was going to mix the sound and how I was going to shape it. So that got me thinking. So the next thing is a bit of a wild card. I'm introducing Cathy Berberian because the piece that I did of Stockhausen involved speech. So I started to think that I really enjoyed performing. I'd done quite a lot. And I wanted to do a voice piece. So I think this also brought me to composition. So I will actually perform a little bit for you. Cathy Berberian was a fabulous singer and composed some pieces. This piece is made of graphics that she made together with a graphic artist, and it comprises all of, or very many sounds that you would hear in a cartoon strip. That's why it's called Stripsody. It's not a strip actor.
Bum bum bam blum blum boings. You stupid kite! Come down out of that tree! Kite! Crouch, chop, 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 clam, clam, clammity, clack, 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 clack. Jump, jump, crunch, slurp, crunch, crunch, crackle, go. Gosh. Lang, 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 lang. Lang, 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 ring, woof, woof, zargra, crumpash, nyan, 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 knock, knock, puff, ouch! Meow, meow. Ruff, 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 cow, 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 click, clack, clickety, clankety, blankety, plop. I'm Frieder, and I have naturally curly hair. Do you like girls with naturally curly hair? Good grief. Boom, pop, ba 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 pow. Tick, 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 tick. Sigh. Dung, dung, dung. Sempre libre di Geophone. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to... The weather tomorrow will be mostly cloudy. Sob. Knock, knock. Oh. Oh. Grunt, snuff, gram, gloob, scram, hiss, rumble, sput, 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 shranchity, shruff, 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 shum, sklup. And there we go. Thank you. So the last piece in this program, part 1, where I'm playing to you, is a piece that I wrote for oboe. So it's called a Catalogue of Blue. So each movement, the first is blues blue, then we have blue indigo, then we have blue green, and then we have blue violet. So each one is in a way a type of melody. I think the first one is a little strange because when I hear it again, it makes me think of a film, but I can't having one of those moments where you can't remember the name of the film. But anyway, I'll let you work out if there's a film music there. Ah, yes, and it's a mix of a type of melodic soundscape.
end of the first part of your presentation. Just I'm trying to be here the, I don't know, devil's advocate or the vox populi or something like that. Maybe questions that other people can think of during your presentation. So what we had under your name said composer and performer. That also tells me that it's not a natural way of existing, apparently, in the 21st century. And we all know that it was a way of, you know, just the way things were in Bach's time or Mozart's time, that also a performer and a composer, you didn't need to add an addition sign, rather it was a natural way of existence. So what you're telling us now is that you're coming from a performer's way, and by meeting these people you became a composer along the way, or composition was always part of what you were doing?
That's a very interesting question. I had, during my studies, also studied something which is close to a type of Kodai method of education. It's a German method called rhythmics, not to be mixed up with eurythmics. It's not that. It's not the Rudolf Steiner. It's rhythmics coming from Dalcroze. So I had this training anyway, where I was supposed to be an oboist, but there I was bouncing balls and dancing in rooms and making up pieces. I had to make up choreographies with speech and sound. And then when I continued playing the oboe professionally, I was still always interested. Whenever we did a project, it was like just the golden opportunity to listen and meet remarkable people. So for me it was a type of transition, but I think the yearning had always been there. But it wasn't a usual thing back then for a performer to jump into composition. And now that I'm composing more, I get asked if I still play. So.
Well, that's always the nature of it. And just one other question, and then I'll let you proceed. Why the oboe? Because, you know, most of the time there is always a story behind why, or maybe it's just random. Some people seem to be born for something, and they luckily find their instrument, or the instrument finds them.
Oh, this is a bit embarrassing, but I played the piano. That was my first instrument, and I was passionate about that, and I was going to be a pianist. And my parents said to me, Cathy, I think you should also learn an orchestral instrument, or else you'll be by yourself a lot of the time. So I said, yes, what? And I was 15 then, so it was obvious I wasn't going to be a string instrument. And so they said, well, what about the oboe? And because I loved dancing, I'd done ballet at the time, I got so excited about the idea of Swan Lake. So when I first got my first oboe, I immediately played Swan Lake on it, probably the wrong key, but yeah, that's embarrassing.
Thank you.
Next part. So part 2 is now the composer part, where I present some of the compositions. I would like to present Cento to you. This was written in 2005, so it's an older piece, but the reason I'm showing it because it relates back to the Maderna piece and the type of freedom that is offered to performers. Cento is a type of organization of verses or poetry, a type of patchwork. It's an extra thing that one can do. So I took texts that had to do with composition or compositional thought. The Indeterminacy reading from John Cage is very beautiful. I will read it, it's lovely. Artists talk a lot about freedom. So, recalling the expression free as a bird, Morton Feldman went to a park one day and spent some time watching our feathered friends. When he came back, he said, you know, they're not free, they're fighting over bits of food. I took Gertrude Stein text on composition, and I took from Herbert Zbigniew, poet, a poem called Nothing Special, which is about composing. Nothing special, boards, paint, nails, paste, paper, string. Mr. Artist builds a world, not from atoms, but from remnants. So I'm going to play the second movement, and what it is,
there are elements in this movement, and the performers have to take these elements. It's for a double string trio, the ensemble resonance, and for two soloists from the Neue Vokalsolisten, and they have to take these elements and decide how to put them together. They can double time, they can half time, and it was quite interesting what came out of that. So.
Not paint. He said, string.
So, another work that I'd like to show you, which also involves freedom for the performer. So you can see now, thinking as a composer, I'm also interested in the freedom of the performer. Whereas before, in the first part, you saw, where as a performer, I was being given freedom by a composer. This piece is called Memorial, and it was done in response to my time in Japan after the great earthquake in 2011. And I was in Kamaishi, which is a town on the northeast. And it was amazing walking around. I was really there 3 months afterwards, and there were still lots of remnants of personal objects that were just on the ground. It was very moving, really. So one of the objects was, for example, go to the next slide, thank you, was, for example, this little bit of plastic. So what I did is took that photo, I took a photo of it, and then made it into a card that had a musical element and a card that was more spare. And there are all of the elements now that, the rest of the elements, a kimono, a porcelain, a fan, a doll, and they became cards that looked like that. So the cards that are more simple can actually be realized by filmmakers. So if there are any filmmakers here, you can also make a film out of this. There are a set of rules. It can be done from between 5 and 15 performers. Everyone has the same cards. Each card lasts 60 or 90 seconds to be decided before you play. And everyone plays their cards in a different order. So we'll now move on to another work, yes, which is a piece for orchestra, and it was a commission for the Bayerische Rundfunk Orchestra, and it took me a long time to decide what to write about, but I had been to Iceland, and I had one of those epiphany that you have sometimes in nature, and I just thought it was amazing, the stillness in the air. It was in a place called Thingvellir, which is a place where, it's an amazing place, it's where the first European Parliament came together, but it's also where the tectonic plates are moving. So what struck me was the structure of the stone that looked as if it had been forced with lava pushing. And on the other hand, there was this extraordinary stillness, and you could feel the strength of these plates under the earth. The second movement is Epidauros in Greece. The third movement, not yet. Sorry, I'm looking over there, sorry, I don't need to. The third movement is Goyaku Rakan, and that is a place in Japan where a Buddhist monk in the 18th century took it upon himself to draw images in stone all the way through this forest. And in the beginning you just think it's a forest, and then you start walking up and then you see a face, and then a stone covered in moss and another face. And it's so beautiful. And this was in memory of people who died back then in the famine. And number 4 is Radio City Hall. So for me, actually, it was all about the earth and the stones of earth and the possible speech or drama that had somehow been imprinted in the stone, like a sort of imaginary phonograph. So let's listen to 2 movements, part of them. Thingvellir, which is the first movement, in Iceland. Where there are these beautiful etchings in the stone. And I took the text from a woman that I'd met in Kamaishi, who gave us her thoughts on her survival after the tsunami and earthquake. Yeah, and her thoughts were kazuko, mirai, so family and future, and memory's not here, but the love of sea and mountains, and the love of life. So they were the words that came. So these are in 4 parts, but I'll only play just the beginning part. Thank you. So that's the end of my composition part, and the third part.
Before you go into the third part, I do have questions because you played your solo piece, and I'm looking at the music here, and that gives freedom to the performer, the notation, the way it is. And then you told us about your piece where you have cards that you base your performance on, and so the element of what aleatory thinking or giving freedom to the performer is pretty obvious. But then you have a fantastic texture for orchestra, and I'm just asking you about your composition method for orchestra. Are you using similar elements, or is it composed all the way through?
That's an interesting point. No, this was composed all the way through, and I'm not always looking to have freedom for the performer because it didn't suit my object here, which was to concentrate on a certain idea. So, if anything, I wanted everyone to play the score as it is. Just in that one we just heard now, there was for the strings a type of notation where I actually wanted quite a smudgy sound, so I gave them freedom about when they placed their pizzicato, because I wanted a type of texture. But that freedom was not to invite a freedom of expression, it was to actually get a smudge without
a certain effect.
Yeah.
But then the question leads to another question, and that is about form and how you write one note after another. Like, are you using structures when you're actually composing the entire piece for orchestra? Do you decide you have predetermined elements that work in the piece, or are you working with rayes, or is it all improvisational like it seems it is in the oboe piece?
In the oboe piece, I basically played the whole thing in C and B. So that was because it was written for Christian Hummel. His name is C, H is B in Germany. So there are different ways that I have going about things, and the orchestral piece, I think it's very difficult to write one note after another. I really need a plan, and that's the other part of me. There's a sort of free part, but there's a plan part. And then when I go for a plan, I really go for a plan. So each movement was mapped out over time, firstly just with drawing and suggestions of sound, just to get an idea of the flow over time. So I sort of mapped out 8 minutes for that movement and how it should develop, and then I actually, for this piece, worked off scales and the harmonies that come out of scales.
And any connection between the source of inspiration and the actual soundscape? Meaning you were telling us about landscape and then man-made art that inspires you. But are you looking for structural connections with those inspirational things, the things that inspire you, or not?
Certainly, I see a landscape or a visual element or a text as a type of inspiration, definitely. So if I have a text, I'm looking for sounds within the text that maybe speak to me, and the landscape and thing. But Libary in Iceland definitely had this tension within the earth that I felt, as well as the stillness. So you could say it's a programmatic piece. I always try to think that I go deeper, but then of course there's fabulous programmatic pieces, so nothing against that. But I do like to think of the structure and to work on that, because I would find it very difficult to keep writing without that time structure and without the structure and pattern of harmony that I'm using.
So your work also depends on the medium that you write for, like this. Obviously, a solo oboe piece is not the same as writing for an orchestra. There's different ways of writing, right?
I mean, in that it was just pleasurable to incorporate all of the elements that I like to play on the oboe that I think other oboists don't normally do. So I was quite happy about that. But that comes out of my improvising language.
Thank you.
Yes, and just to know, I just wrote an opera for South Africa, which was with classical black South African singers, and it was totally tonal. So I guess the language changes. So I'm going to talk about participatory music performances. Now, the context for this is that I have been involved in a lot of educational work, and what I really love to do is creative educational work. So imagine that I'm not a composer, but that I make beautiful tables. And imagine that a group of people come to me and say, hey, we love your table. We don't particularly want to buy it, but we'd like to make a table with you. We find it so beautiful, we want to know about making a table. So they would come and I would suggest materials, and they would start to have ideas, and I would think to myself, oh, that's not going to work. And then suddenly it works, and I think, how amazing is that? Or I can see something's really not going to work, and I will say, look, you'll crack the wood if you do that, so better be careful. So it's sort of the same when I do a participatory music creative project. I'm with a lot of people with varying experience of music, but who are brimming with enthusiasm and ideas. So it is a beautiful thing to get together with people and see what we come up with. There are, of course, different contexts. It might be with school kids, in which case, like brass bands, in which case I give some tools of improvisation or how to work on a creative project. Why don't we have a look and see what's here? The first one is a project I did with young brass players, and we made this piece together. I said, we have to make a fanfare, so what do you normally do as a fanfare? And we found a language, and then I said, and there are some bells in this city, it was Wismar, so let's go and listen to the bells and see if that produces a language for it. And it did, so I composed a piece for them for brass fanfare and bells. So in that, we created together in the beginning, and then I finished it. This Messages for You was a project I did in Kamaishi with community choirs at the top, so we were having fun, dancing and singing. Then I was with the brass band, and after that I got them standing a little more loosely than sitting like that. And in the end we gave a concert with community leaders who came and spoke, with the brass band who made all sorts of ways of telling a message, sometimes clapping with Morse code, sometimes with lights, tracing out the Japanese word mirai, which is future, or sometimes simply playing on their brass instruments with the choir, a song that the choir had made up together with me. And then we had a brass band installation in the temple, so that was very new for everybody. That project led to another project with a photographer. So we made sounds on the beach, and then we played with lights, because there was a story that the night that the tsunami happened, you could not see any stars. So that's why it's called We Are All Stars. There's the brass band on the beach. And these children had not been to the beach since the tsunami. So this was a very important time. Thank you. This was a community project. It was really, I tore my hair out over this one because it was with 200 community musicians, and I had to compose a piece for them. And we have to imagine there were 14 accordions, 30 guitars, 7 oboes, and the oboes were 2 very, very good oboists, 3 middling ones, and 2 little tots who had only just learnt to play. So that was a very interesting project. And so I composed that according to their level. This was totally participatory because it was a project in a South African township, Kraaifontein, at a school with a school choir. So we made an opera about their life. They told us stories about their lives. We did workshops. They sang. They made up texts. They put music to the texts. Then we invited some soloists, and I wrote some music for the soloists. So in the end, it was a combined effort to be the opera. So now I have a short film, it's about 3 minutes, just showing some of those results of those.
Any idea. I was just told that I must write some things about my childhood and how did I grow up and all this stuff. I didn't know that we're gonna make an opera.
What was really exciting was that out of all that you were writing came some texts for songs. And I think your song was Having a Good Friend.
Yes. That song means having a good friend. It's like having everything in the world. A friend is someone who's been there for you all the time.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful song, isn't it? Because it's about having a good friend, and even if they let you down, you still love them for being a friend. And having
a good friend is like having a shining star.
To think of all the questions that are in the heads of our audience members here, but let me start off with the question, and it's kind of a loaded question because it's pretty obvious that to you the social element of music is very important. And I always find it fascinating when something like contemporary art, contemporary music from the ivory tower manages to somehow get to another environment. Just really 2 or 3 sentences about that, and how if you see that you actually need to break barriers to be able to do that with the music that you are writing and you're playing, or you find it like, I saw you had a title there that you were head of education. What's that about?
So I'm not quite sure of the question, but...
The question is it a normal state of existing for you to take this Maderna and Britten and your music and use it for social, development? Because these projects look like, maybe I'm mistaken, and they're purely artistic, but they look like they are some kind of social development project as well, right?
Yes, whenever I do a creative project, it's very important to me that we spend time creating together, but that we make the performance a real performance. And so a lot of the design of the project is about how to guide it towards a performance that will be absolutely artistic. And I found that for me the social component is very important, because I think that we make music together, we should dance together, we should sing together, we should really experience music in a vital way together. And some cultures do this more than others. So I'm delighted to, if I can facilitate or make a space where people feel, great, we can make something together. There is sometimes a little bit of fear that happens with...
In you or in the other
Not
party?
in me.
Not in you.
No, I'm always convinced. But generally, I mean, children have no judgment whatsoever. And the times that it's a little tricky is with an adult group of people who know each other, like a community choir, and that's when they're a little afraid to do something that's maybe not going to work. But I have, until now, always managed to convince them that it's fine. I'm very careful, but we've had great times with such choirs in the end.
Any questions from the audience? Please feel free to ask whatever is on your mind. Not whatever, but relating to our... Yes?
You said you like dancing. Do dance inspire music? When you see someone dance, does it inspire? Does it help you inspire you?
Just let me repeat the question for the recordings. The question is if you see someone dancing, your dance inspires music or not, or does it?
Well, seeing someone dancing inspires me to dance. So, but I just think that music, if we feel the shape and the weight and the colour of music, it can be expressed in so many different ways. I have a little story about that. I gave a workshop in Japan, and we were all standing in a circle, and it was all adults. And one of them adults was the local Buddhist priest from the temple that we saw in the film. And I have this very strange exercise that I always do at the beginning of a workshop. We stand in a corner, in a circle, what am I saying? Stand in a circle, and we pass a sound that we make to one another. So it's also to get the rhythm going. So it'd be sort of, and it goes around like that. And then you can start sort of doing it short or long, or loud or soft, and still keeping the. And the Buddhist monk came to me afterwards and said, "Cathy, I now understand music." And I thought, wow, just from that exercise. And he says, it has weight and it has colour. And I thought, well, that's lovely if someone takes something away with them like that.
Next question.
Ich habe den Blaubart dirigiert in Berlin mit der Philharmoniker. Du hast ein wunderbares Projekt mit der Gefangenen gemacht. Könntest du das kurz beschreiben, weil das könnte für uns interessant sein.
Just a short description of the project related to a Blueberry's Castle production.
Yes, that was a project where a local priest had contact to a prison. It was the Tegel prison. And we invited Jocelyn B. Smith, a wonderful singer, and we went into the prison and started talking about the text, the situation. I didn't ask what the prisoners had done, but I did find out later quite serious stuff. But extraordinary how the prisoners were hungry to create, to make something, to talk about it, to discuss it. And then afterwards, you know, we arrived at a rather wonderful piece out of this, you know, along the lines of Blaubart. So subsequently, I did 2 other projects in the prison. One was based around Schumann, Perry in Paradise. And so we did that as a type of TV reality show with one of the prisoners put on a pair of wings and stood at the door and wouldn't let anybody through. And it was a wonderful interpretation, but a lot of the situation of the prisoners, the fact that they don't get to go through the door, you know, it was a very important and interesting thing. And the other piece that we did in prison was Rheingold. So the gold became drugs, and the prisoners were they thought the story was great. They had a super transformation of the story, and they were very involved because, of course, they knew a lot about power structures. So we talked a lot about that. So often in these projects, a lot of other themes and topics come out of the projects. So that's type of project is called a response project, where you take an already existing artwork or masterpiece or a piece of music and discover what is behind it and then make your own interpretation.
There was one more question there. Was there?
Yeah, it's not the most interesting question, but how did Ensemble Moderne come about, and what was your sort of part in the creation of the group?
I just finished studying, and this group, I had been in the Junge Deutsche Philharmonie, which is a youth orchestra, and there was a thought that other groups had tried to form, and there was as yet, in 1980, no group. And so a few people got together and decided, well, let's just try and do this with students. So we had our first meeting in 1980, and we played Schoenberg, Opus 24, and we played a piece by Friedrich Goldmann, the trombone concerto. And then a little bit after that we thought, well, this is really fabulous, we're going to do this. But we realized that we didn't really play that well together. So we went to a man called Peter Oakbush, and we said, Peter, can you come and work with us? And so we did an extraordinary years of collaboration and learning from Peter.
So one more question.
I'm an oboist too, and I would like to be a professional oboe player. And have you got advice from?
She's asking for advice to become a professional oboe player. I mean, other than practice.
I think the main thing is, there are 2 things, but it's all about balance. So it's all about balancing the body. It's all about keeping soft here so that you don't crunch here. So that you're sort of like a tree. So you've got this support here. So I do a lot of practice where I'm like this, and I'm keeping a loose thing. This is all strong, and this is all loose. So it's about balance of forces. So you don't want to push too much because you're just trying to support here. So you want fairly soft, no biting, because you want to have the sound resounding. So it's about just continuously thinking about it should be easy to play. So if it's not easy, either the reed is too hard or you're pushing too much. So keep it nice and easy. And play the recorder up sometimes and think, this is easy, this is how I want the oboe to be.
And then blame it on the reed. You can always blame it on the reed. It doesn't work. So Cathy started by saying that you must meet the composer. I would like to emphasize there are composers, or rather musicians, that you must meet, and Cathy Milliken is definitely one of them. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.